There's a passage in the American Southwest that has existed for thousands of years. It crosses international borders and traverses the O'odham Nation. This passage and the desert that surrounds it is the mythology of modern media and political narratives. We set out to understand this landscape. We set out to share the story of this territory.
It's 1849. You've heard about gold in California. You live in Mexico, you live in South America, and you want to take by land the shortest route to the gold field. The shortest route is through the desert. The desert is also dangerous. You have to know exactly where the water holes or wells are. So the temperatures are running 110, 120 degrees by day, and it might drop down to 90 at night. And that straight route of about 130 some miles to Yuma is the Camino del Diablo, the route of the devil. It's also the route of the dead because a number of people died during the trip. But it was this set of migrants, miners, workers, travelers, padres, soldiers, explorers, scientists who wanted to learn about that country in between and also get to California and strike it rich. And that's the Camino del Diablo.
You end up spending about a year planning a transit of one of the most notorious overland routes in America, the Camino del Diablo. And those that are unfamiliar with it think you're crazy for doing it. And then, even those that are familiar with it think that going out there is, borderline insanity. But after you complete the Camino del Diablo, at least the modern day Camino del Diablo, you end up in next to a par 3 golf course in the suburbs of Yuma, Arizona. I mean, it's just like a very anticlimactic finish to something that you had been planning for a year that was kind of surrounded by all these apprehensions and fears. So the real story of the Camino isn't completing the Camino del Diablo. The real story of the Camino is experiencing the Camino del Diablo.
Well, the Sonoran Desert is, culturally, it's an interesting place as well as in terms of its natural history, because to a degree, more so than elsewhere, we see our populations as distinct but overlaid. So a Native American population, an Hispanic population, and an Anglo population. And the cultural history of this part of the world, the Sonoran Desert, is really a dance culturally with those three overlays.
This area is tri-national. And as a matter of fact, in the town of Sonoy, there's an obelisk that has O'odham on one side, it has Spanish on another side, and the third side is in English, talking about how this is our home, we live here, and we appreciate these other cultures that we find. And we also find that these people can get along, they have much to share, we're all in the same boat, none of us are rich, we all enjoy a good dance and a good meal, and we've worked together down here. So it's really an interesting borderland in terms of the culture, the music, the people, the relationships.
I'm Lorraine Marcus Eiler, and they go the Curly School, and then Yamasha, who get me muy key Darby Wells Laguta Tahana Jord. Ma Jamaica de muy high chip trick and no to Wobik. Chick fun much in Chichery. I was just saying that I grew up at Darby Wells but I did go to school here at the Curly School and lived out in the desert where we both worked and played. and lived there until such time as we moved into Ajo.
There's no question that the bike takes you to some really incredible places, and one of those places is Ajo. It's a little frontier town that sits about 30 miles north of the Mexican border, and if it wasn't for the bike, there's no way I would have ever visited this town, and I just can't wait to get back. Not only does the town roast its own coffee, there's just so much support for the local artist community that's apparent when you ride through town. Ajo is just a town you can easily fall in love with.
A number of these routes out there, the bicycle would be an excellent tool. The trick is to try to pick out your routes and know a bit about what you're getting into and take a tire repair kit.
Not sure that we have enough CO2 cartridges or tubes, and we left our chain lube in Tucson. Ajo is where we started the ride, and you just right outside the town, it turns into dirt roads and some of the most beautiful desert you've ever seen.
It's interesting because, backpacking and riding your bike on the Camino, you're asking for it in a way, you want that sense of hardship, and it's a feature, not a bug. It's something you want.
The Sonoran Desert is all about cactus. Getting out there and experiencing all of the principal colander cactuses is not something that you do every day, at least where I'm from. You see the Sanita cactus, the saguaro cactus, and then the Oregon pipe cactus. That's something I'd never seen before. So all those cactus only live in one place in the world, the Sonoran Desert. But the Oregon pipe cactus, its biosphere, its world is even more narrow focused. And you see those just as you leave Ajo, just south of Ajo.
Since I think January 2002 or January 2003, I think this is the 77th time that I've photographed it. I admire this plant, even though it's not really a very picturesque plant. Your average Arizona highways photographer would reject this as a candidate to photograph because it is so obviously stressed. But this is the plant that I've made a commitment to, and I'm going to stick with it, even after it dies, although it's unlikely that it will die before I do. The Sonoran Desert is one of the most biologically diverse deserts in the world, and especially in terms of plant life. So it took me actually a little while to get used to the Sonoran Desert and its relative lushness. And when a lot of people think of the desert, they think of sand dunes or think of arid wastes like the surface of Mars or something, and this, there are places in the Mojave and even places in the Sonoran Desert where it can feel that way, but in the Sonoran Desert it's really many more plants here. In fact, I think that's what really animates the desert here. It's not the animals, but the plant life. It's, for me, and in thinking about photographing, those are the things that can change. They could actually show some evolution in the time frame that I wanted to bring to it, which is about 30 years of photography. So I had spent a lot of time going out to the desert with my camera and trying to represent it in an art form. At a certain point, decades after I started doing that, I kind of came on the idea of photographing individual desert plants. And desert plants really announce themselves as individuals in a way that they don't in a forest or other landscapes. So the aridity, the lack of rainfall, sort of means that the plants are going to arrange themselves as individuals. So that was part of how I kind of came to this idea of photographing individual desert plants. I mean, we're all kind of wondering, I suppose all of us, everywhere, we're all kind of wondering what's going to happen as the planet gets warmer. You know, are my children's children going to get to see an organ pipe or, you know, or a Joshua tree? Or are they going to look at my photographs and, you know, I didn't start out photographing to make a record of something that was soon to be gone. Really more attuned to a kind of celebration of what's to be gained from looking at the world, and specifically the natural world. But I think, you know, it's possible that what we're looking at now will go through a significant change as the world, you know, gets warmer. And we've all got to, you know, deal with that.
This was my first time riding in deep, deep desert, and it's hard. I mean, huge stretches of sand that's basically impassable by bike. It's hot. There's no question about that. The sun is relentless. And I say there's like little water. There's really no water along the Camino.
Much like we've done in the past, I'm definitely questioning every decision I made up to this point. This is, I am done. D-U-N, done.
But when you start to finish your ride and come into camp and you're getting camp set up and the sun's going down, you feel like you're connecting with the past. I mean, people have been out there experiencing those sunsets, like a desert sunset, for thousands of years.
Just like over here, we've got like a green, yellow gradient, and then purple, blue gradient with these amazing, majestic cacti. Zero wind. It's like 70 degrees. This is like magical. Like over here is all red. It's like every color.
And the other part was sleeping outside during the summer months. During the summer months, we'd move out of our adobe houses. My dad would put out the metal beds and he'd put cans of water underneath the legs of the beds so spiders and whatnot couldn't crawl up on the bed. And we sleep under the netting. So every night we had the whole sky. The stars, all that stuff to look at.
We're living in an interesting time right now where we were traveling through one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life. At the same time, there's a giant wall that's 30 feet tall being built across this amazing, beautiful desert.
I mean, the O'odham are the people that have been here for, you know, since time immemorial, really. I mean, the archaeologists make a distinction between, you know, Paleo Indians and archaic people, and then the sort of O'odham chronology begins at that point after the Archaeo period, and that's, you know, thousands of years before the birth of Christ. But I think that an O'odham person would think more in terms of, well, no, this is a one continuum. It's not broken up that way. We don't break it up that way. So they think of themselves as the original and abiding people here that have been here since time began.
The O'odham group ranges from the Phoenix area all the way down to Hermosillo, all the way from the San Pedro River to the Colorado River, so it's just a huge area of O'odham. There are 4 major groups of O'odham in Arizona. So we all speak O'odham language. There's some dialect differences. We also have O'odham in Mexico. I'm from that area. And so when they put the border in, what they did was they cut off part of our group. And there's still villages down there. My mother is from Quito, a village called Quitovac, which is about 35 miles south of the border. It's also another oasis area. And so a lot of our O'odham on this side, especially the Thalna O'odham, have members that live, or family members, and also Hiachir O'odham that have members that live on both sides of the border. And so we do have a lot of issues with that.
You know, the border itself is a line that really throws off a lot of energy, positive and negative. Right now, I've been going down to the borderlands for 35 years or so. So right now it is as militarized on both sides as I've ever seen it. And I hate to think, extrapolating forward, if this rise in militarization continues, what it's going to be like in 20 years.
And it wasn't so bad back then because there are gates along the reservation and whatnot, people to go back and forth, which was okay. I mean, it was allowed. It was easy for us to get in the car and drive across and do things and then come back, no problem. But with all this other stuff lately in the past few years, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And now with this, it's stopped the freedom of passage for religious purposes, ceremonial purposes, visiting family, taking food down there, taking clothing down there, for them to come across for health reasons. Anything that you can imagine, if you lived in one town and your grandmother lived in another place and they put a wall through and you're not allowed to go do there. Any type of interaction that you would have had with your grandmother is put to a halt.
In a good day, in a good trip, you could probably go from Sonoita to the Colorado River in 3 or 4 days. But if you had a problem, you might never make it. It might be one of those stone markers outlined across on the route that there were hundreds of at one time. Most of them have disappeared from erosion or whatever. But hundreds of people died trying to make this trip, even during the 49er times. And other people have died before and since, unfortunately, in different migrations. So it's a very special place. It's a holy place because a number of people have died out there. And you always wonder, am I next?
You know, the Sonoran Desert, it can be absolutely deadly, and it happens all the time, especially to people who are vulnerable or people who are ill-informed about the dangers. There is an aspect of it that's interesting, though, is that in the desert, to an extent that other landscapes don't offer, there is a complete spectrum of decay. So when you are in the forest, a tree will fall over and it'll be gone, in 5 years or whatever it is. I've been photographing a saguaro that had another saguaro fell next to it. The carcass of that saguaro after 20 years is still very evident. And so that, in a way, that produces a sort of awareness of death and the passage of time that other landscapes sort of obscure. It becomes really part of your experience going through the desert to see this spectrum from alive to dead.
How about that one tree? It was probably, I don't know, 3-4 miles ago.
Yeah.
And it was almost covered the whole road. When I saw it from afar, I thought for sure there'd be some sort of an animal laying down underneath it or something.
Yeah.
Because it was probably the
shelter.
most shade that
Yeah.
I've seen out here.
I think your observations of the desert are far greater than mine, because I've just been staring at sand trying to survive. Like, I haven't had a chance to take in the beauty around here. Because we're, I think we should be done with this section of the ride by now, but we're about halfway through it. I don't know how we thought we could do 50 miles in 5 hours out here.
Without the actual roads there and knowing exactly where you're going and having it mapped out, it would be very, very tough terrain. I mean, not only are there cacti everywhere, there are quite a few mountains as well. I mean, jagged mountain ranges that you would have to navigate around or over.
The Camino del Diablo is no joke. It is not only unforgiving, it's one of the most remote places in America. We had all the best gear, and our ride was only 3 days. If you're to walk across that desert, it's an 8-day hike, and you'd probably have to carry between 100 and 130 pounds of water to survive. And to think about having to make the choice to head into the desert for a better life is, not only terrifying, it's heartbreaking.
Certainly people who in the country that they're fleeing from are they're fleeing because of economic devastation, climate change, or physical violence. Well, I don't know what the stories were. I just know that they were obviously so important because you have a backpack. You're on this journey. You may die in the desert, so you're bringing just the bare bones essential belongings that mean so much to you. The items here were previously owned by migrants and those seeking asylum crossing the border into the desert. They were apprehended by U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents, taken to a processing center, which is where I worked for 11 years as a janitor and landscape person. It was about my 4th year working there. I was becoming upset seeing all the food, the canned food that the migrants were carrying with them in their backpack, that was just being thrown away. Perfectly good food. And so one day I mustered up the courage and went to the supervisor on duty and I said, "Hey, can I bring this food to the food bank?" And his exact words to me were, "Bless you." That's when El Sueño Americano, the American dream, began. I would see a rosary, a Bible, a group of family photographs, deeply personal belongings, and it's like, this is not right. So see, my role is I'm just the temporary custodian of these belongings that I'm in the process of photographing. And there is so much material to photograph. This is someone's little diary. It's actually kind of the translation that I got of this, it was like their last will and testament, asking for God's guidance and that their journey to America would be safe. And so this was the the genesis, it was my asking if I could please collect the food to bring to the food bank. From 2007 to 2012, there was over 60 tons of food that I brought in that otherwise would have gone into the landfill. And just little baby shoes. These, I don't know what the story was, if there were a pair, an extra pair was taken from a child, or if this was like a memento that a parent brought with them to remind them of why they were doing this in the first place. So it's just, my hope is just to get people to think, what is going on? How can we make things more fair and just? And if I can do that by having you look at a pretty photograph, that's fine with me. Just know what you're looking at.
Packing up that last day on the Camino, there's no question we had a deeper understanding of what the Sonoran Desert is all about.
You don't need as much stuff as I ever bring. That's what I've learned. People ask a lot, why I go out for these adventures, or, why Justin and I go out for these adventures, and it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to sleep on the ground. It's those experiences that you remember, for a lifetime. There was one night in particular, though, and there was just this incredible cloud structure, this tiny little crescent moon that was wrapped up in it. It was, it went on forever.
We had a very real, up-close experience with what it's like to be out in the Sonoran Desert. I was grateful we made it, but I think I was more grateful for the generosity of the people we met that were willing to share their stories with us to help, kind of all of our understanding of what this landscape is like, what the Sonoran Desert is. And I think, actually I know, there's no question that the Sonoran Desert truly is a shared territory.